Hey everyone, welcome in to another daily editorial here on the KE Report. I'm getting an update from Aztec Minerals. We're going to be talking about some recent channel sample results at the Tombstone Gold Silver Project in Arizona. These initial results from the contention pit, in and around the contention pit on this Tombstone Project. I am chatting with Simon Dyakowski, President and CEO of Aztec Minerals. Aztec is traded on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol AZT and on the OTCQB under the symbol AZZTF. Now, Simon, let's just start off with a little bit of clarification in terms of these sample results in and around the contention pit. Look, it's an area that you have been exploring on, although you hadn't done much work here since, I believe, last year. So in terms of the goals around sampling, completing these channel samples in and around the pit, what are you trying to prove and show here?
Yeah. Hey, Corey, thanks for the opportunity to come on the show and discuss the results of this recent program. And we've done quite a bit of drilling along the contention open pit over the last 3 years, about 6,500 meters and about 51 holes, really in a grid pattern, set up in the bottom of the pit and on the western pit wall. And what became clear in our modeling was that we weren't getting any credit for the structures that crop its surface within the pit. So, you know, the modeling is really constrained to an area of influence around the deeper intersections underground, but we had no surface data. So that was an obvious gap in our modeling and presented an opportunity for us to get back on the ground over the spring months when the weather's a little bit cooler down in the desert in Arizona, to go and not only sample, but also do a lot of mapping. And so these results were the first batch of chip channel samples that we took that came in, obviously, first from the lab. We got about 280 of them back a couple of weeks ago. So we decided to batch them up and put them out and then indicate, obviously, where the other samples will be coming from. So the goal was to get a lot of information from the surface, which we really had none of before. And this will allow our modeler to hopefully infer mineralization from the surface all the way down to where the intersections are at depth from the drill hole. So very key information, and also confirms to us that it looks like this mineralization is trending over towards the Westside area. Now we're seeing that both in our mapping information and in the samples that we released today.
So just for clarification on that point then, Simon, you have done some drilling in the contention pit, right? And you even have a cross-section, figure 2, I believe, in that news release that shows some past drill results. But now, using these channel sample results, is it almost like putting just a short drill hole into this area? Or do you need to go back and follow up with more drilling in and around where these sample results come from?
Great question, Corey. And our grid is spaced at about 50 meters right now. So we do think it's sufficient from a drill spacing perspective, but this does fill in some knowledge gaps for our modeler to work with. So this won't result, I think, in any additional drilling in the pit. But what we're talking about doing in our next drill program is really pure step out drilling into the west side area, which we've highlighted in the yellow dashed line. And I want to just talk about this for a moment, because this was a huge finding for us last year. And we really weren't able to talk about it until we actually acquired the Westside mine in a transaction last May, which is a patented mining claim that contains a lot of the mineralization that we're going to be targeting. Now, you might ask why we haven't sampled along the surface in that area. And that's because it's covered in gravel and vegetation. There's not a lot of outcropping. Whereas obviously the pit is all outcropping since it's been excavated historically. So what we're doing here is we're completing the modeling work on our existing drilling while preparing with mapping and obviously some adjacent sampling to get ready to drill over on that west side area, which represents more of a pure exploration angle to this project, where, you know, if we're able to connect the dots, there's the potential to at least double the mineralized footprint that we've already drilled off in our first 6,500 meters of drilling. So it's a pretty big target area for us that we're excited to get going on here. And these results, in our minds, highlights really the grade potential of that expansion, and reiterates obviously what we've already been seeing in the drill chips and core over the past 4 years, which have had some very strong results in an open pit heap leach style of environment as Tombstone is.
So regarding this Westside area, something you and I have talked about over the last couple months as you've issued some news on that, and it sounds like you're really moving closer to getting a drill on the ground. But what do we need to look for in terms of the work you've done at Westside? Still waiting on some results from the lab to, I guess, further isolate drill targets where you will actually be drilling in that area?
Yeah, so we're also doing quite a bit of 3D modeling for the first time. So we have acquired underground maps and projections from the historic operators that were operating in the dozens of mines that span across that stretch. So we've now isolated where the vein systems and the fissures cross over. So that'll be dictating specifically where we drill. And then, of course, the mapping will help us in determining those specific drill targets as well. And we expect to have that important work wrapped up over the next 2 to 3 weeks. So our investors will have an opportunity, and our shareholders, to see that in a news release where we'll have the full results of the sampling program, which is indicated obviously on our plan map here, but also the mapping program, which has a much, much bigger footprint than just the pit, which we'll also have ready to show investors over the next few weeks. And then the specific drill targets within that Westside area to get started on, hopefully in August or September.
Are you anticipating any synergies, any similarities at all from this Westside area to what you already know in this contention pit area?
Well, we are indeed. And what we're seeing in the West, in the contention area, is really the highest grades of mineralization appear to be in areas around north-south dikes that we've intersected with the drill hole. So there's 2 in the pit, there's the Empire, there's the contention. Those seem to be driving very strong mineralization. And in the underground workings that we've now modeled, we see an additional 4 dikes that cross-cut that Westside area. And then finally, the Westside fissure was a fissure or vein, is a strongly mineralized gold-silver vein that formed the basis of some underground mining back in the late 1800s and returned on a limited basis, of course, for that era of mining, some of the highest silver grades that anybody's seen in the Tombstone district. In that mine, we have in a news release last year reported that we saw about 6,000 tons of production there, averaging about 70 ounces per ton silver. So it's a very high grade silver target that we know about. Obviously, somebody else knew about back then to mine, but fast forward to the 80s, was anticipated to actually be open pit mine. So it's a really fertile target zone where we think our 12 to 14 drill holes will have an excellent shot at intersecting some additional mineralization in the same style of the contention mineralization.
Okay, so the news release also says there's this reconnaissance sampling that was done and assays are waiting. Is that still mostly just Westside area, or are those potentially other targets on the project?
No, there are a number of other targets on the project that we sampled. And essentially, we walked the entire western half of the property and sampled dumps and whatever outcrop we could find. So we're still waiting for the results of the assays for those samples. So I don't know which of those areas will turn into drill target, but there was lots of information taken. We took almost 100 samples from additional targets well outside of that open pit area.
So let's talk about the overall strategy at the Tombstone Project broadly. You've done some drilling in and around the contention pit and this contention zone. Now you also have some more sample results that show that mineralization that you weren't getting credit for in the drill holes, it's right there in the walls and even shallow depth. But then you're building up these other targets. The Westside area sounds like a priority. Maybe some potential other targets that are generated from this sampling. This still very much exploration focused, but now you're not leaving the contention pit in terms of exploration, but you want to test out some of these newer targets.
Well, that's exactly right. And I'll just reiterate that we have 51 holes in the pit, and we have a really good handle now with these recently obtained surface results of that mineralization in that zone. But we felt that the market was perhaps viewing this project as simply just an expansion target, maybe just constrained to below the contention open pit with limited width. And what we found in our research and now in our mapping and sampling and modeling is that there's a lot of further shallow gold silver oxide potential here that I think the market is really giving us credit for. And the Westside target area is just an obvious example of for us here, where not only do we see it in the model, but we see it in mining plan, that there was plans in the early 80s to go another 500 meters in a dog leg towards the Westside mine from the main pit. And this is supporting, in our view, a much, much larger open pit, shallow oxide gold silver scenario than what had been previously in operation in the 80s at Tombstone, and what you're seeing in our first 3 passes of drilling over the last few years. So it's just a good opportunity for us to remind the market that Tombstone is not a one-trick pony. It's got a lot of room to grow. All of the targets that we've identified to date are on private patented mining claims, something that I cannot overstate in the current climate in the world, really, for permitting mines. Being on private patented claims in Cochise County, Arizona, is one of the top places to be in the world if you hope to put a mine in production over the next few years. It's just a fact of life of how things are developing in the mining industry. Private land in Arizona is a good place to be.
Okay. So Simon, I guess big picture then, as we get some more of the news from this surface program, when could you maybe get some drills on the ground here? And since it is on private land, like what would the roadmap be to utilizing the aspect that it is on private land and moving these projects forward?
Right. So drilling will be contingent on, I know you're going to ask me this, on finances. However, the cost of drilling RC in this project is relatively minimal. We're only talking about some shallow holes, 150 to 200 meters in depth. So the budget there can be anywhere between, let's say, $300 to $400 a meter, depending on how complex the specific target area is. So it's not going to break the bank to drill 12 or 14 holes. When could we be drilling? Well, we're looking to be drilling upon completion of this work program that we've started. And so we've really only announced the first batch of results. So we still have a couple more batches to get through. Then obviously final interpretation, getting the drill targets ready and mobilizing. So looking at perhaps a 2-month time frame to get that done. And yeah, that's basically it in terms of permitting for drilling on private land. It's a 24-hour process. So it's not anything that we have to be too worried about in terms of causing delays. And then if you're alluding to the permitting timeline for mining operation on claims like this, I can touch on that too. It's potentially about a 2-year time frame once you have a scoping study or pre-feas in place on these kind of claims. That would be a reasonable permitting time frame. Of course, we're not at that point yet. That's a very forward-looking statement. In discussions with our permitting consultants, that's the guidance that we've been given. Again, we are in a growth mode right now, in a discovery and growth mode. Once we feel that's been tapped, then we would pursue further study it more along the traditional lines of PEA or pre-feasibility and resource estimation. But at this point, given the host of rich targets that we've identified recently, it would be very premature for us to be moving in that direction at this point.
Excellent. Thank you for addressing those, Simon. I will post a link to the Aztec website in the show notes so you all can read over the recent news release that we discussed, and please send me any questions you have for Simon. Simon, thanks again for your time. I'll follow up on the back of some more news.
Awesome. Thank you, Corey. Have a great day.